Good morning, my name's Matt Weintraub. I'm Bucks County District Attorney. This is a follow-up, a reprisal of a situation that occurred on Saturday, October the 24th, earlier this year, about 8 weeks ago. At about 5:15 p.m., Jason Kutt was shot while sitting with his girlfriend at the end of Old Ridge Road in front of the lake in Nockamixon State Park while waiting to watch the sunset together. Jason was 18 years old. He was a 2020 graduate of Penn Ridge High School. He had his whole life in front of him. Jason's girlfriend, who was with him at the time, heard the shot, observed Jason fall backwards. She then looked up Old Ridge Road after he was shot and observed a male hunter dressed in all blaze orange standing behind a yellow gate on Old Ridge Road looking in their direction. That was 8 weeks ago. As many of you will recall, we asked for the public's help because the case had been unsolved. Jason's homicide had been unsolved at that time, and frankly, we didn't even know what we had, whether we had a crime or not. But thanks to the public's help, and due to great and relentless police work, I knew that we would solve this, and we have solved this crime. I'd like to especially thank the following agencies, for without their help we would not be here today. That's the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office, Montgomery Township Police Department, Warminster Township Police Department, and of course our Bucks County detectives. There are many, many more agencies that I will thank in a press release that will be in writing, but I don't want to list them all right now for the sake of expediency. But the reason that we're here today is to report that we've now made an arrest in Jason Kutt's homicide. Today, 52-year-old Kenneth Heller has voluntarily turned himself in with his attorney to be processed and has agreed to a no bail status and enters the Bucks County Correctional Facility today for this homicide. He's been charged with a number of offenses, and they include criminal homicide, recklessly endangering another person for putting Jason's girlfriend in danger, possession of an instrument of crime, which ends up being the instrumentality that he used to kill Jason Kutt, the rifle I'm speaking of, possession of an offensive weapon, which is essentially a brass knuckle dagger combination that we found when we searched Mr. Heller's Warminster home, and 2 hunting law violations, which are of particular import. 1 for shooting, injuring, and killing Jason Kutt, and 2 for failing to render aid under the hunting law statutes. And if you're a hunter, you know these are of the utmost importance, because hunters live by a code, and by and large they are incredibly respectful to the laws that they must abide. Mr. Heller was arraigned at 10 a.m. this morning. He did get a no bail status, as I explained to you, and if he has not waived his preliminary hearing, he has already. He has already waived his preliminary hearing. So that the next, do you know when the formal arraignment will be?
It was moved to April.
His formal arraignment will be in April, and at that time, at least as of today, and in consultation with Jason's parents, who we have spoken with all throughout this process, and with their blessing, we've made an agreement with Kenneth Heller. There are several reasons, and we've accomplished a number of critical goals with this agreement. Jason's family gets to know exactly what happened to him. They will not like it, but they can have some finality in the knowledge of what happened to Jason. They get finality in the criminal justice system. As many of you know, these cases sometimes never end. If they're contested, if they go to trial, especially during a time like this where we're in battle with COVID, and then if they're contested, as is a person's constitutional right, the appeals are endless. By making an agreement today, we get to avoid all of that for Jason Kutt's family. And I think this is also very important, and so did the Kutts, that they get to celebrate his life, get back to celebrating his life, which is what is most important. If you'll recall, even 8 weeks ago, we talked about how Jason's family gave the gift of life. So they understand what it means to celebrate somebody's life and not to wallow and languish in what happened to him and how he died any longer than they need to. Unfortunately, when people get enmeshed in the criminal justice system, that's what happens all too frequently. We tend to focus on the death and the terrible tragedy. And by coming to this agreement, all these past couple of weeks, we're able to really, really limit that terrible circumstance. This matter will resolve this fairly, equitably, and quickly for all involved. I am pleased to say that the defendant has cooperated. It's anticipated that if his cooperation continues, and that will be his choice, we'll honor our end of the agreement certainly. I don't anticipate that it will go otherwise, but that's his choice. Then he will plead guilty in an open plea to all of the charges, which will include involuntary manslaughter as the homicide charge, as the top charge, as well as all of those other misdemeanors that I've just enumerated for you. His sentence will be determined by the court. Should he honor this plea agreement, and I expect that he will face a maximum of up to 10 to 20 years in state prison. I imagine he's hoping for far less, and he will have the ability to argue that, to mitigate that in front of a judge who will determine his fate some months from now. Not years from now, though, which I'm very grateful to say. Clearly, this isn't a perfect ending. Perfect would mean we have Jason back. And that's just not how real life works. That's not how criminal justice works. So this isn't even really a happy ending. But it is a fair and a just and a final ending. So for that reason, I'm pleased to be here to report this to you today. I'll take some questions if you have them.
Did you find him, or did he turn himself in? How did you come upon him as a suspect?
The investigative circle began to close rather rapidly around Mr. Heller. And I can't speak for him. I don't know what is in his mind, although I've now heard him speak. And it would seem to me that it was just an inevitability. That if a person took, people have the option to not cooperate all the time, and many don't, and that's their constitutional right. But it seemed to me that this was made inevitable by the great police work that occurred, and by through the public's help when we made our plea.
Right, but it was 2 months ago that Jason was shot, and so he's just being arrested today. Did you know it was him, and did he speak to you? Can you give me some more details?
Not till pretty recently. We did not know it was him till pretty recently. And then even then we were not certain. You never know it for sure when there are no eyewitnesses. And I have to be guarded because I'm not allowed to comment. Even though there's an agreement in place, I'm not allowed to comment on whether somebody has confessed. You can read the probable cause information and draw appropriate conclusions from that. But it became very, very obvious to us that once it's like putting together a puzzle. Once you start putting the outline together and you start fleshing out the pieces, they all really start to click into place very, very rapidly. And there were no other suspects when we came to this point, that we got down to what I would call the negotiating the agreement, speaking with the family, coming to today.
Was his car seen leaving the area, or are you able to connect just how? I mean, he's in the open woods. It takes a lot of police work to find someone like that. How police meet?
So that's a fair question, Matt. Yes, we had it narrowed down to essentially 3 vehicles that were seen in that area and leaving that area at the time of the shooting. And one of those did end up being Mr. Heller's vehicle that we were able to track back to him.
Was he the hunter that was seen?
Yes, he was.
2 months ago, Matt, you said that this could have been a terrible accident and that you really called on whoever was responsible to come forward. Would you still characterize it as an accident today? I mean, do you have any additional information?
Well, I stand here being the main accuser and charging him of some serious crimes. So I will say this. I do not believe that it was Mr. Heller's intent to shoot to kill Jason Kutt. He never knew the man. They had no animus. This wasn't a, hey, I'm going to try it out and see what it's like to be a killer moment for Mr. Heller. He has expressed remorse. He was a hunter. He is a hunter. He hit what he aimed at. And he made an awful, awful mistake. He had a high duty of care as a hunter, as all hunters do, especially in an area where you know that the public is free to roam, and does, in Nockamixon State Park. Whether those rules are sensible, that's not for me to say, but they are the rules. So I didn't want to prejudge it 2 months ago, but now knowing all the facts, this will be a fair resolution, and I do think that these crimes are the appropriate ones that fit Mr. Heller's conduct.
Do you think the rules should be changed and the public should be away from the hunting section?
I'll be the first to admit I'm not a hunter, so I don't want to indict anybody. I will say that generally as a class of people, hunters are very, very careful. They're so conscious of their surroundings. They understand the heightened duty of care. They know that they have the ability to kill with every shot they take. So I don't want to indict them. I don't think that would be fair. I mean, you talk about an avoidable but tragic situation. This was a situation where it was the worst confluence of events, where two people are in a public park enjoying a sunset with their whole life in front of them, and you have a third person who's just enjoying a hobby that he loves very much, a hunter, and he makes a tragic error in judgment, and with the worst possible consequence. So that's not really for me to decide. That's for the legislature to decide. But I'm faced with these facts, and this is the determination that I've made.
Can you explain involuntary manslaughter for the non-lawyers watching this?
What would you like to know about involuntary manslaughter?
I just wanted an explanation. There's going to be people watching who are like, what's that?
It's I'm not diminishing it, but it is the lowest form of homicide that there is. And essentially it's when a person has a duty of care to others, but either through gross negligence or recklessness, they violate that duty of care and they cause somebody else's death. It's a misdemeanor. Right now he's charged with criminal homicide generally because we don't know how this is going to play out at the very end. We're bound by the agreement, of course, and we'll honor it. But it'll be up to Mr. Heller to decide ultimately what he wants to do. I have no reason to think he wouldn't honor this agreement, but just to protect ourselves, we've charged him with criminal homicide generally.
You mentioned that the Kutt family will be able to hear exactly what happened to their son. Have they been able to talk to the suspect in this case? Will a meeting be set up, or will this all come out in court proceedings?
I would expect this to come out in court. What happens after that will be in large part up to Mr. Heller and to the Kutts. It's way too soon. We've been in constant consultation with them, live and on video. We've not made a move without their blessing and understanding. This has been very difficult for them to process and absorb, as I'm sure you can imagine. They've handled this with a lot of grace. I'll give them all the credit. I don't know how I would be in their shoes. I hope I never have to be, of course. But they're going to have a lot to process. My goal here is to come up with a just outcome that accounts for the criminal liability. Mr. Heller's, first of all, to make sure we got the right guy, which we did, and to make sure that he's held criminally accountable for what he's done. but also to allow the Kutts to move on so that they can celebrate Jason's life. And I know they've in fact already talked about some great ways that they want to do that. And to give you another example, we had started to formulate a basis to suspect Mr. Heller, and we were able to head off the Kutts from starting a reward fund, for example. So that's already one, at least very small but significant way that we were able to affect their behavior in a positive way. They didn't have to outlay a reward fund because we knew we were going to be able to bring this to a close.
Did the suspect's family call police and say, hey, my family member's under, this is his car?
It was more circuitous than that, Matt, but it was definitely, I don't know if these people still wish to remain anonymous or not, but to give you a little bit of a taste of it, was somebody that knew Mr. Heller pretty well, that had seen our news dispatch, that then reported to a friend of theirs in a faraway state, that then contacted us and told us about where our focus potentially should be. And we ran down a lot of leads that ended up being immaterial too. That's just the nature of police work, but this one was pay dirt.
You mentioned, unless I heard you wrong, I think you mentioned that he hit what he intended to his target. Did he mistake him for, did he know it was a person? Did he mistake him for something he was trying to hunt? Can you explain that?
I have to, I apologize, I have to be circumspect. The ethical rules require me. I'm not allowed to comment on whether Mr. Heller said anything or what he said, but I am led to believe pretty concretely that Mr. Heller, as a hunter, took aim and shot what he believed to be an animal, and believed to have killed what he shot. Yes.
What was Mr. Kutt and his girlfriend wearing? Wasn't it not apparent?
When you, I guess we don't have this picture, but there was one picture that I saw that I would describe as a recreation. And if you were at the end of the lane where the gate is, where Mr. Heller took the fatal shot, and you're looking all the way down the lane at the lake, which is visible to you, and you got to remember the sun is setting, and I'm taking some liberties here, but the sun would be setting, I take it, into your eyes. Then if a person were sitting where Mr. Kutt and his girlfriend were sitting, and Mr. Kutt was a tall young man, what you would see is his head. You would see his head almost as though it's perched on the rise of the road. So it wouldn't look like two actual people sitting there. Now, I'm taking a lot of liberties here, but I'm just trying to make sure that you can understand and have a picture in your mind of what a hunter may have seen there that's plausible.
So no bright clothing that would have been apparent, anything like that?
Well, I can't say for sure what he saw, but that would not be...
You knew what he was wearing, what he had on.
We certainly did afterward, but that is not what has been described to us. I'll say it that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But his parents earlier had said that he had worn a cap with like it had a bright orange bill or red bill on it.
I think that was underneath.
Okay.
But I can only say it like this. So I now have a picture in my own mind's eye about how this played out, and I guess that's very important because I'm the person that decides the charges. But it would seem to me that as horrible as this is, and frankly as criminal as it is, it was a tragically criminal misapprehension of what somebody thought they saw versus what they actually saw and what they shot at. Any other questions? I'll take one more.
You said that he had...
His sentence is going to be, he bore no animus towards Jason Kutt. He didn't even know the man. So he's going to have to live with this for the rest of his life, and I believe it will have a terrible impact on him. That's not what I hope for. That's not what I wish for. I just think that that's just a natural consequence of having shot somebody that was not your intended target. So I think that's a good spot to leave it there. We'll make sure that you get the slides. We'll make sure you get the probable cause and the complaint. I appreciate you all for coming out under these circumstances. And hopefully you have a happy and a safe new year. Thank you all for coming out.